Welcome to the Clarice Smith Performing Arts Center at the University of Maryland. Please take this opportunity to silence your cell phones and anything else that might beep or buzz. Please note that photography and audio or video recording are prohibited. Please take note of the nearest exit from the venue in case of emergency. Thank you for being here with us.
My name is Dr. Lielle Sand. I'm an associate research professor of visual studies and the director of the Gildenhorn Institute for Visual Studies at the University of Maryland. We are honored to host the acclaimed Israeli author Etgar Keret as our 2024 Dubin Family Lecture keynote speaker. I truly wish this is just a passing phase in the higher education landscape. But before we turn to our program today, although I hope this will be a peaceful and respectful event, I would like to make this following announcement, quoting the UMD guidelines, just for the sake of law and order, so to speak. Persons should not obstruct, disrupt, interrupt, or attempt to force the cancellation of any event or activity sponsored by the university or by any users authorized to use university facilities. Now that we got that out of the way, I'd like to say how happy I am to welcome you all to campus for this year's Dubin Family Lecture. I'd like to start by saying thank you to a bunch of people who deserve lots of praise and recognize the support that made this event possible. I'd like to thank the Dubin family and these people for sponsoring this fantastic lecture series for the past 15 years and more, as she told me just a few minutes ago. Lielle and the family have shown tremendous commitment to the idea that such events are extremely important because they enrich our learning experiences by providing insights from leading speakers, fostering intellectual growth, and promoting dialogues. We have many other supporters in the audience, and we're grateful for their generosity and ongoing commitment. I'd like also to mention how grateful and deeply honored to have Alma Gildenhorn, and to extend our deepest thank you to the Gildenhorn family. Alma is here to my right. She will talk in a few moments about her late husband, Joe. May his memory be of a blessing. He passed away from last October. But I wanted to say that she is a true force of nature, and for ongoing support as well as the entire family who helps us to do the work and always think about ways to enhance it, both you and Joe, in the way that you envision it. So thank you for that. I'd like to thank our Dean, Stephanie Shanakin, our Dean, Greg here at Arts for All, Kelly Blake, Kelsey Houstons, and the entire Markham staff for their never-ending support and cooperation. I'd like to praise Greg. Where's Greg? Greg Chauffeur for his hard work and guidance, and finally a tremendous thank you to the Director of Jewish Studies, Max Grossman, our Business Manager, Lisa Klein, and our Program Coordinator, the incomparable Avis Coleman. They say that success is best when it's shared, and I'm honored and delighted to share all our accomplishments with this incomparable A team. The Joe and Alma Gildenhorn Institute for Visual Studies is dedicated to the studying and researching of Israel in all its variety, but also to presenting political, cultural, and general interest programs featuring Israel and its place in the Middle East. I was appointed director of the Gildenhorn Institute in July 2023, and believe me, this past year was one hell of a time to run an October 7, 2023 has changed everything, and many of our plans were thrown out the window given the scope and the nature of this horrendous terror attack, as well as its aftermath, both in the Middle East and across campuses in the United States. President Hines may address in his remarks how we performed since October 7th, but I just want to say how different and significantly better the overall since was at College Park, and for that we are grateful to him and all of the other leaders on campus that were part of this. There are many shareholders who actively worked to make that happen, the faculty as well as the students, and I hope we can keep this delicate equilibrium in place during the current academic. As a professor and director, I think that one of the main challenges that the last year or so presented us with is the oftentimes lack of knowledge and inability to have a nuanced conversation about the events in the news. Gildenhorn Institute is not an advocacy organization on campus, but our mission seeks to address these somewhat pervasive intellectual weaknesses using the effective academic tools available to us nevertheless. Indeed, through our courses, public events, and outreach, we offer numerous opportunities to address various aspects of the conflict in Gaza and beyond. We brought together scholars, practitioners, analysts, who provide perspective and different views on the same event itself. I think we provided a meaningful service for our students, for our faculty, and the administration, and the non-academic community outside the university. I think that what I want for my students is to acquire and employ critical thinking skills and the ability to seek fact-based knowledge and reflect on it, rather than rely entirely on information about one of the most complicated political issues of the century with a 15-second clip on TV. And you can say, okay, Boomer, that's fine, but I truly believe that if you want to understand something, you need to walk the walk and walk the distance. If you come to my office, for example, you will see on the door a poster with a quote by Albert Einstein that says, education is not about learning of many facts, but the training of the mind to think. This is my philosophy, this is my pedagogical philosophy. And I think that the arts and the humanities are indispensable in fulfilling Einstein's call and hold particular significance at the University of Maryland. Literature, languages, history, religious studies, philosophy, Jewish studies, and of course, Hebrew studies cultivate critical thinking, creativity, and a deeper understanding of the human experience. These disciplines encourage students to analyze complex ideas, explore different perspectives, and engage with ethical, historical, and cultural questions. They prepare students to navigate an increasingly complex and interconnected world, and successfully solve them. So to the undergraduates in the room, I strongly encourage you to consider minoring in visual studies, or at minimum take one of the fabulous classes in the spring, but certainly and definitely attend our various public events. To the younger folks who already graduated, you are also more than invited to attend our events. I also encourage you to think about giving to the program so we can build on and enhance our success for many years to come. Now, it is an honor and privilege to invite to the stage Dr. Daryl J. Pines, who is the 33rd President of the University of Maryland, and the Glenn L. Martin Professor of Aerospace Engineering. President Pines, the floor is yours.
Good evening, everyone. How are you? It's great to see you. It's an honor and privilege to be here tonight for this wonderful Dubin lecture. I'm just trying to wonder, why is no one sitting in the first two rows? I guarantee you, I'm not going to bite you. No one's going to bite you. But great to see such a great audience this evening. You know, I also want to thank all the students as well, as Dr. Salzman just mentioned, for being here to experience the Dubin lecture. And also a round of applause to Dr. Lielle Sand for his leadership and hard work over the last year underneath the umbrella of the Joseph and Alma Gildenhorn Institute. Thank you for your good work. I know it was a difficult year for you, for your inaugural directorship, so let's hope that best pastures are ahead. This institute is very, very important part of our community, academic, and our cultural part of our community. As a strong and vibrant Israel studies program helps Jewish and non-Jewish students alike explore the complexities of Israel and its place in the world. As this new academic year has gotten underway, I've been telling everyone around the University of Maryland that this is the type of excellence that we offer you, which is this institute, the Gildenhorn Institute, and the Dubin Lecture. and for everyone to embrace dialogue, even though it's nuanced, even though in times of a very difficult situation, but to have dialogue. This is exactly what an educational institute is supposed to do. Our Israel studies and Jewish studies programs are vital parts of this excellence. And today's event exemplifies the Gildenhorn Institute's mission to host open dialogue and help our students understand Israel and its people. These efforts will become even more valuable as we approach the one-year horrific anniversary of October 7th, a reminder of how I and all of us remain hopeful for an end to this conflict and for a return of the hostages. Yes, thank you. During this past year, I and the rest of our community and the university's leadership have relied on the valuable input and insights of many people of the Jewish community, including Dr. Salzman. And also, I want to give a big shout out to Dr. Maxine Grossman. I don't know if she's in the room. Is she in the room? There she is. Thank you, Max, for all that you've done for the University of Maryland and all that you've done for the Jewish community. Of course, we would not also be here if it wasn't for a great Marylander, a great Terp, Miss Alma Gildenhorn, and her husband, the late Joe Gildenhorn. I have to say to you guys that when I first became president, fortunately I knew Joe and Alba Gildenhorn, but the greatest honor that I had in the very first 2 years of my presidency was to afford them, both of them at the same time, the highest honor, which is an honorary degree from the University of Maryland. So please give both Joseph and Alma Gildenhorn a round of applause for all they have done for University of Maryland. Now, Alma's here today, and just to share just a few insights about Alma, she has a commitment to the arts, a commitment to community service, a commitment to all the academic offerings here at the University of Maryland. She is a foundational, inaugural member of our Board of Trustees. Without her, it wouldn't have started, and her husband. She is actually the light, a beacon of light that we lean on, even today. Ms. Gildenhorn has provided me enormous advice over these 4.5 years that I've been president, and I'm just grateful for her. Even in the most recent conflict, she has provided just incredible advice to me and my leadership team. She's an exceptional person, a tremendous public servant, and she has made a foundational impact on this university as a Terp. So please join me in welcoming Alma Gildenhorn.
Good evening, everyone. And Dr. Pines, thank you so much for that very generous introduction. And I deeply appreciate it. Tomorrow would have been Joe's 95th birthday. And so how fitting that I can begin the commemoration of his big day by being here at the University of Maryland in his recital hall with the cause that he loved the most, that he was involved in, other than Maryland sports, was the Gildenhorn Institute for Israel Studies. Joe always felt that an Institute for Israel Studies should be a part of the College of Arts and Humanities to complement Jewish studies. And lo and behold, in 2005, when he was asked whether he would be interested, I don't think they finished asking him the question, because he said, yes, yes, yes. And it really lived up to his dreams until the day he left us. It took us quite a while to find the right director. And we were very fortunate to find Yoram Perry, who was a scholar, a journalist, and an author. He became the founding director, and he did an outstanding job. He shaped the Institute. He made sure that every avenue of cooperation with other Israel Studies program was the rule rather than just a thing. We had exchange students, we had guest scholars. It was an enormously, just as the Maryland campus is, a very inclusive program. We exchanged students with Israel. We had visiting scholars. It was an enormously interesting time as it became a first. It was a creation here on campus, and it's wonderful to be part of a creation. He also was the editor, along with his dear friend, Professor Paul Schramm, in editing the Israel Studies Journal, which went all over the country. And at the end of Yoram's tenure, the Gildenhorn Institute was regarded as one of the most important and largest Israel Studies programs in the country. Following that, his good buddy, Dr. Schramm, who is here this evening, became the director and continued on this road of scholarship and inclusivity and helped it grow until we had a new director, and you heard him tonight, Eli Saltzman. Dr. Saltzman is a man with he's Israeli, but he's a man with a strong point of view. And what he says, he means. He has brought a dynamism to the Gildenhorn Institute for Israel Studies that I've never seen before. And he's like the Pied Piper. When he speaks and when he says something, he means it, and you heard it tonight. So we're very, very proud. We had a lovely relationship with all three directors. And now our dynamic, Dr. Saltzman and his colleagues, are taking it to the next level. Last October 7th, Joe was heartbroken when he heard about the savagery, the barbarism of the attack in southern Israel. And it was 2 weeks before he passed away. He was enormously concerned. And he said, what should we do? He said, do you think what's going to happen to the Gildenhorn Institute? Will it be sort of like nullified? What's going to happen? He said, I have this terrible feeling it's not the end of the conflict, it's the beginning. He said, it's going to change the map of the Middle East, and it's going to have serious consequences. He said, but I'll tell you something. In my heart, I know that at Maryland, they're going to protect the rights of everybody. Because he said, over the past 16 years, yes, it is, no, 18 years, excuse me, he said they've proved their mettle. And he said, it's part of the biblical proverb that tells us that the house of wisdom has 7 pillars. He truly believed that with the formation of the Gildenhorn Institute, those 7 biblical proverbs of wisdom had really been formed. And those 7 pillars of wisdom: knowledge, integrity, judgment, imagination, courage, tolerance, and faith. He believed that in the 18 years since its establishment, this was what we could count on. And we've never been disappointed with the direction. At this time, I would like to mention that it does take a village. It takes a community. It takes a community of righteousness to keep our university as safe as it has been. We've had a responsive and responsible leadership from all of our leaders, led by Dr. Pines. And for that, we are deeply grateful. Believe me, if we didn't have a man of his stature at the helm, you would have seen a different story. We're a very diverse campus, and all voices are heard and considered. So we thank you very much, Dr. Pines. I don't know what we would have done. He weathered the pandemic. He weathered this, in addition to building our campus to the great university that it is. I want to thank, it's an evening of thank yous. I want to thank my family who are here tonight, Michael Weiner, Adam Moskowitz, and I also want to thank, as I have, Eli Saltzman, Greg Schofer, of course, our dean, Dr. Stephanie Schoeniken. I wish all of you could have heard her remarks earlier in a small reception. They were wonderful. And someone who hasn't been mentioned, and it's very important because this is the Terp spirit, the Maryland spirit. I'd like to recognize Dr. Shibli Telhami, who is the Anwar Sadat Professor for Peace and Development. He has been our partner all along, and we're grateful to him for his consideration, his intellect, and his moderation. And now to my dear friend, my best friend, Liz Dubin. Thank you, Liz. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You and Dickie were so generous and have always been. And this has been a university special event for 14 or 15 years. And I can't thank you enough. That's what friends are for. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alma. Somebody told me that the microphone didn't work previously, so I'm going to start my presentation from the top. Well, in a way, you didn't come to listen to us. So let's move to the main course of the day. It gives me great pleasure to introduce tonight's keynote speaker, Mr. Etgar Keret, who is the prolific author of books, novels, and short stories, and is one of the leading writers of contemporary Israeli literature, in addition to his influential work in film and television and other artistic mediums. On a more personal level, I can say that he is the person responsible for making me like Israeli literature as opposed to just reading it because my high school literature teacher told me to. His debut collection of short stories, Pipelines, or Tzinorot in Hebrew, was a transformative experience for me in Israel in the 1990s, and I suspect it had a similar impact for those who read it and are currently in attendance at this talk. Etgar Keret will talk about the way he experiences Israel through his various works, particularly literature, and no doubt shed a new light on this fascinating and still evolving country, especially given its current circumstances. Following his talk, he and I will have a short conversation, and then we will open the floor for Q&A. There are two microphones, one at each side of the stage. So please think about questions, because I have a list, as I told him, of around 35,000. So you might need to help me. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Etgar Keret to the stage. I hope you can hear us.
Hi, good evening. I'm very happy to be here. I'm supposed to talk today about stories, and the special roles that they have for Israelis and Jews, because we are the people of the book. Sometimes we tend to forget that, but that's the truth. And And I want to start with an anecdote that happened not in this Gaza war, because we had quite a few of them. In the Gaza war that took place in 2014, our son, who will be drafted next month to the army, was 8 years old at the time. And he was already a veteran when it came to dealing with missile alarms. But all the missile alarms that he ever experienced were when he was in our home or in other people's home. And we were driving our car in the middle of the road, and suddenly there was a missile attack siren. You have about 30 seconds before the missile hit. My wife stopped the car. The three of us immediately got out of the car, and my wife lied on the ground and said to our son, Lev, lie on the ground here with me. And our son said, no, I'm not going to. And she said, there's no time, lie on the ground now. And he said, last week I ate a popsicle and it fell on the ground, and you said that I can't eat it because it's dirty. So if it's too dirty to eat from, it's too dirty to lie on. And my wife kind of gave me this look like, how about one time in your life you do something, instead of just staring. And I asked her son, hey, have you ever played the pastrami sandwich? And he said, what? And I said, don't you know pastrami sandwich? It's really easy. Mom is a slice of bread. You're a slice of pastrami. You lie on mom. And I'm also a slice of bread, and I lie on you. And together, we'll be a sandwich. And our son immediately lied on my wife, and he said, we never played that. And I said, yeah, this is a game that you play only when they shoot missiles. And I lied on top of them, like kind of pushing the ground so I won't crush them with my weight. And about 5 seconds later, the missile exploded in the air and pieces fell all around us. And we got up, and our son said, wow, that was fun. And then he looked at us and said, when is the next missile attack? And when we got home, my wife said to me, do you think this is really the smartest thing, when they shoot a missile? And I said to her, but it was dangerous, so I told a story. And I know that this may sound a little bit strange, but I grew up in a family, a child of 2 Holocaust survivors, the youngest of 3 children. I'm the youngest of 3. And in our home, it was always obvious for me, even though it wasn't articulated, that storytelling and imagination, they were not accessories or luxuries or something that, could be fun. They were a means of survival, that you need to know how to tell a story. You need to imagine, because if you won't, you're doomed. My mother lost all her family in the ghetto, in the Warsaw Ghetto, and she was a sole survivor. And when she raised me and my siblings, she said, look, they don't take you to mom's school. The way that you learn to be a mother is basically you look at your own mother and your own parents, and you make a list, and all the good things that they do that you like, you say, one day I'll do them with my children. And all the bad things, you say, I'll never do that with my children. And she said, but I didn't have this training. My parents were murdered when I was very young. So she said, I'll have to experiment. I'll have to make up some kind of a system, but the honest disclosure is that it's an experiment. So if anything I do sounds to you a little bit too strange or out of line, or that you think that there is a better way, tell me, and we will work on it together. And I must say that I never had any problem with any of the rules and the systems that my mother had. The only problem that I had was when I grew up and I discovered that the word didn't obey that system because it made much more sense than what all the other people were doing. Like one of my favorite rules growing up was that my mom had this rule that if it rains, you don't go to school. And as my mom said, with all due respect, I've seen your teacher, and they don't teach you anything worse getting wet for. If it's a nice weather, go play with the kid, listen to them. Maybe you learn something, but really, if it rains, stay home. And of course, again, through my wife, I've learned the first time I told my son that he can't go to kindergarten and he'll have to stay with me and play all day. My wife said, what about umbrellas? You know, they look like mushrooms and they actually block. And I said, yeah, but you don't go to any school. And she said, well, most people do. And in the world that my mother had created for us, stories had huge importance because one of the most meaningful memories that my mother had was of the bedtime stories that her parents would tell her in the ghetto. And in this time, they could not provide her with food. They couldn't provide her with warm clothes. But they could provide her with a good story because this was in their power. So every day when they would go out and try to survive another day and maybe bring a piece of bread home, they were using all that time to make up a story for their beloved daughter. And at nighttime, they would tell her the story, and my mother would proudly say that she never fell asleep in the middle of a story because she knew that those stories were told especially for her. And that if she fall asleep, they will be like stillborn. They would not be complete, you know. And so she felt that she had a responsibility. And she loved this experience so much that she wanted to have the same experience with her children. Now, my parents never had the formal education, but they were autodidacts and they read in 6 and 7 languages. And all our home was full with books, but there were no children books in our home. Because my mother believed that every evening, like her parents, she should spend the day doing what she needs, but also find the time to make a story for us, one that will have to do with the specific day, with the weather, with what we were going to do, with a cat that we saw on the way to school. So in the evening, she could tell us a bedtime story. And those stories were amazing for us. And I remember that very early on, I realized that people who do not know how to tell stories, you know, cannot give the love to other people. And of course, I knew that there were such things as children books. But my mother explained to me that, you know, that parents that read to the children Winnie the Pooh or Alice in Wonderland, they're basically lazy parents. Because very much like some parents prepare their children dinner every day and other order a takeaway, then, you know, this was the equivalent of ordering a pizza. If you really love your child, you'll make a fresh new story for him every night. And those stories, they were dear, they were special. You know, I remember that when the first kid ever came for me for a sleepover, I explained to him that before we go to sleep, my mom is going to tell us an amazing story. And then my mom went close to the kid, almost kind of sniffing him, looking at him, and she said, tomorrow, ask your mother, she'll tell you a story. Because she didn't have any extra imagination or love to waste on any snot-faced kids that I would bring home. Stories meant something. And I felt, you know, that for my mother, the idea was that the ability to tell a story had many, many functions. But maybe the most important one is that it gives you the freedom to forge your own identity. Because if you have to rely on other people's stories, it's like, you know, if you don't have a driving license, the buses, they go to certain places, but there are other places that you never go to. But if you can tell your own story, then you can get anywhere. And one of my strongest memories as a child was that once my mother took me to a child pediatrician, and there were 2 chairs, just like here in the waiting room, and there was a mother and a child sitting there, about the same age that we were. The kid was slightly older than me. I was, I think, 8, he was 10, but my mother was in her 40s. And when we got there, we lived in a town of Ramat Gan that most people there are from Iraqi descent. So even if they didn't know people by name, they knew the few Holocaust survivors that were there. And the moment that we entered, the mother elbowed her kid, and she said, get up, give her a seat. She's a Holocaust survivor. And the kid got up and said, please, ma'am, have my seat, in a very polite way. In the 70s, kids were more polite. And my mom looked at him and said, oh, thank you, that's very nice of you. But may I ask, why are you giving me your seat? And the kid says, because you're a Holocaust survivor. And my mother said, oh, that's interesting. And what do you think it means that I'm a Holocaust survivor? So the kid said to her, that you suffered a lot, that you were humiliated, that you were in great pain, and that the little things that we can do now is give you a chair. And my mom looked at him and she said, this is a very thoughtful explanation, but may I offer you another explanation to what it means I'm a Holocaust survivor? And the kid said, yeah. So my mom said, I think it means that if you, me, and your mom would stand here for hours with no water and no food, you too will fall first. So I suggest that you hang on to your seat. And at that moment, I realized how important it was for my mother not to subscribe to the story that was suggested to her by the Word, and especially by Israel. The story of a Holocaust survivor. For her, the idea was that she was expected to be a pebble in a mosaic. She was supposed to be one of those 100 dancers in the Olympics that form those great shapes that you see, from a drone. And she didn't want to do that. In her point of view, she was a Hollywood star in a period movie, and the damn producer stuck her in the worst period in history. But still, it was her movie, and it was her story, and she'll tell it the way that she wants to. My father also taught me in many ways lessons that I found very, very valuable after the 7th of October attack and finding myself thrown into this crazy reality, and maybe even before that. I remember once as a child that I asked my father innocently if the Holocaust was the worst time of his life. And my father looked at me and thought a little bit, and he said, look, the way I see it, there are no good times and bad times. There are only hard times and easy times. And he said, and I tell you, all my life I hustled for the easy times. But if I have to be fair, it was the hard times in which I have learned about myself the most. And since the 7th of October, this sentence keeps echoing in my mind, saying, I'm not a victim. This is not a bad time. This is a hard time. And this is a time for me and for my country to learn about itself, what it can learn. And my father, he survived the Holocaust with his parents. He lost his sister by hiding in a hole that they dug in the ground. The hole that they dug was shallow, so they couldn't stand in it. It was narrow, so they couldn't lie in it. So basically, they were hiding in it for 600 days in which they were sitting. When the Russians liberated the town they were in, none of them could walk or move his muscles, but they got out of it. And when I asked my father, how did he stay sane, which is, kind of a question that only, I don't know, a 7-year-old could ask, Then my father said, I had a trick. He said, every day when I would wake up, I would imagine a word exactly like the word I'm living in, but I would change one detail in it. For example, I would say, I'm imagining a word in which Nazis are prosecuting Jews, they're looking for them, and the Jews are hiding, and they're trying to catch them, and when they catch them, they give them candies. So, in this word, I would try to avoid them, and then, the Wehrmacht would catch me and say, eat cookies, you bloody Jew. And I say, no, please. And they say, shut up. And they would give me a cookie. And then, I would be caught, by the SS, and they had this thing with gummies, and they say, have the gummies, you damn Jews. And I would have the gummies too. And then I would finish that day, very chubbier in my mind, and go to sleep. And wake up the next day, and the next day I say, okay, word exactly like ours. It's really like, they are Nazis, but you know what? I'll change one detail. They don't have anything against Jews. They have this thing for little red-headed girls, and they hunt them down, and they look for them everywhere. And me in my class, I had this beautiful red-headed girl, and I hide her in my attic. And when the Nazis come, I trick them. And she falls in love with me, and we get married, and we have 3 red children. And another day was gone. And as a child, I said to my father, I said, Dad, this is really silly, The words that you were imagining didn't exist. Your dead sister existed. Your dead relatives existed. This is not exist. What's the point in that? And my father said, look, it's a human reflex that when you're in a very, very small space, you try to widen it. And if you can't widen it physically, then you widen it in your mind. And the moment that you imagine a word, then you can say to yourself, there is another word, not just the word I live in. There is another word I can yearn for, dream for, hope that I'll get to one day. But if you just confine yourself to what's around, then you don't have a chance. And I think that this importance that my parents always gave to the ability to invent a story, to tell a story, to imagine something that did not exist, was something like, in Jewish tradition we say, V'igata lebincha, which means like that you have told your children, that it was really like giving us the message not only of their stories, but of the importance of the ability to be able to tell stories. And I must say that when I joined the army, I discovered another fact about my family history, and that actually has to do with my father's side, that all the men in our history going, I would say 4 or 5 generations back, were very bad soldiers. My great-grandfather was a horrible soldier in the Tsar army, and my father, for example, he was in the infantry, and he always said, like, the one thing that he's proud of, that he fought in 5 wars, always in the front line, and never hurt anyone. And while my older brother, he was I think the only soldier in the history of the IDF that was tried, found guilty, and sentenced to jail for practicing paganism. And the story behind that was that in the Lebanon war, they left him to guard an aerial antenna, and he got so bored being there for a week that he turned that antenna into a huge Indian totem with the face of an eagle. And his commander claimed that he surprised my brother while he was worshipping the antenna. My brother's flimsy line of defense was that the commander came when he was tying his shoelace and that he wasn't actually bowing to the antenna. But somehow in the military they always believe the commander, so he found himself in jail. And when I joined the army, I've also learned very quickly that I'm not a very good soldier. I blamed my mother for that because my mother had this system at home that she called it the justification system. And it meant that children had to do what a parent told them, but he had to justify it, which means as a child you could always say, okay, go shower. Okay, but why? Because, you smell bad, and tomorrow when you go to kindergarten, nobody would want to play with you. Okay, I'll shower. And this system really worked beautifully in our home, but it didn't work as well in my basic training. Because at the first night when the sergeant had asked me to crawl in the mud, I said to him, I'll happily crawl in the mud, but could you tell me for what purpose? Why do you want me to crawl in the mud? And the sergeant said, what? And I said to him, please tell me, if you try to humiliate me, I'll put my hair in the mud. If you want to train me more physically, I'll crawl faster. Let's work together. And this was the first time that I got detained in the army, first time of many. And I must say that in the 6 months in which I began my army service, I started my army service, I've been shifted or thrown or, rolled off the stairs of at least 3 different units. When one of my commanders, a very, very sensitive and gentle religious officer, he said to me that being a believer, he believes that every human being, an animal and plant, they are put on earth for some reason. And he said, I'll be honest with you, you serve under me for 4 weeks, and I have no idea why God had created you. And this was kind of a blow, for an 18-year-old kid, But he was a sensitive guy, and when he saw that I was really sad, he put a hand on my arm, and he said, listen, son, I'm not saying that there is no reason for your existence. I'm just saying that it takes divine wisdom to understand it. And because the army does not have divine wisdom, they had to settle for more kind of a mediocre kind of wisdom, and they found out that I was very good with math and computers, and they put me in a computer unit, and in this computer unit I was really, I had to take shifts in a very, 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 very small space, and the shifts were very long, sometimes 30 hours, sometimes even more than that, and I was totally isolated during those shifts because, no internet those days or no cell phone, so basically you could read a book or talk to yourself or do both, but there were not many options. And it was one time when I was in this small space in a very tough moment during my army service that I felt that I couldn't take it, that the walls were closing down on me. And it was then when I remembered what my father did when he was in a hole. And I said, okay, if I can't widen this space, maybe I can widen it in my mind. And it was in this room where I sat and wrote down my first story. And I don't want to go over time, so I do want to finish with a little piece of reading, which has to do with the 7th of October, because I think that that when the 7th of October hits us, everybody basically went out there and tried to do whatever they can do to help. The things that they needed the most were drivers, and I'm a horrible driver. People needed people to prepare food, and I'm a horrible cook. So I would just go around and try to do all those things that I can. I went with my wife, and we would go to all the communities of the people from the kibbutzes, and we would offer to do things, babysit, tell stories to children, tell stories to adults. I have a prescription for medical marijuana, and I would offer joints to whoever was interested. Doing basically something there, to be able to help. And I have many difficult stories from this time. You know, the ones that really stayed with me as a very symbolic one is the fact that the first community we met, which was basically a week after the 7th of October, when we got there, the way it goes, because there was complete chaos and, you know, and basically no government around, no institute, that when you would go to a place, you would try to organize and improvise things by yourself, but there were always people who got there like a few hours before you, and they, like volunteers, and they would help you. So if we come and say, all right, I'll get the people to read there, And the first time we got there was this young, tall woman, very impressive, and she held a baby in her hand, and the baby was asleep. And basically for all the time where she arranged everything, the baby was in her hand, you know, like not crying, not waking up, a good baby. And we did all the activities, and before we left, and I said, oh my God, I wish our son was like your baby, you know. He's so cute, he's so quiet, he's so nice. What's his name? And the moment I said that, she raised her face and her eyes got wide open, and she said, I don't know. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, when I came this morning to volunteer, there was a woman breastfeeding her child, and they came and told her that her husband was murdered. And she fainted, and when she fainted, somebody held the child, and when he came to help her, he asked me to hold the child. And she said, I must bring it back. And I think that there was something in this moment that it was really like how tricky reality is. How when you see this kind of quiet baby asleep in the arm of his mother, and then you understand that it's a quiet baby who's away from his grieving mother that just heard that she had lost her husband. And in one of these meetings, so I don't know how many of you know kibbutzes, but one thing about kibbutz is that you have no privacy in a kibbutz. You know, I always say, like, you know, if you go in a kibbutz, you know, and they go and say, oh, this is Menachem, he wears a wig. Come on, Menachem, show them the wig. And like, you really, like, you don't control your secrets. You don't control everything. It's like it belongs, you know, it's a communist idea. Your embarrassments there belong to the kibbutz. The kibbutz can do with it whatever they want. And when I came there was an amazing girl there, and her mother was next to me. It was next to her, and she called me and she said, hey, Edgar, come here. I have to tell you a story about my daughter. And I came, and the daughter said, please, Mom, I don't want you to tell that. And she said, why? It's fun. I said, yeah, but I don't want you to tell that. He said, come on. It's a great story. And of course, started telling the story with the protest of her daughter. And she said, you know, when we were in the room holding the handle, and the Hamas, they got the Nukhba terrorists were inside our apartment. They were walking and they were shooting things. And we heard shouts. Then my daughter, you know what she said to me? Really funny. You know what she said to me? And I said, no. And she said to me, Mother, there are so many books that I haven't read yet. I don't want to die stupid. And the girl was really, really embarrassed by the story. And somehow I find myself sitting with her and talking to her about books and about a lot of things. And in a conversation, I also learned that her father went out to fight a terrorist and was murdered. And as we were heading back, you know, I had her phone number. She gave me her, and I had this urge to write something to her. And, you know, and I couldn't write anything that would make sense, you know, but it's a WhatsApp message, so you put one word after another and you pile them and you send it because you want to give something, and all you have is those bunch of words. And I sent it to her, and after that I felt embarrassed, you know, for doing that. And the next day I wrote to her and I said to her, look, I'm sorry, you know, what I said, I hope it wasn't out of line. And she said, they buried my father yesterday, and I read this in his funeral. So I just read it to you to close this. I invented a name for it. You usually don't invent a name for WhatsApp message, but after she told me that it was important for her, so I made a name, and it's called Signs of Life. Now close your eyes and try to stop being angry. Try to stop raging at all those who deserve your righteous fury. Close your eyes and allow yourself, just for a moment, to simply feel the pain, to hesitate, to be confused, to feel sorrow, remorse. You still have your whole life to spend persecuting, avenging, reckoning, but for now, just close your eyes and look inward, like a satellite hovering over a disaster zone, searching for signs of life. A lot has been taken away from you, but you're still a human being, wounded, bloodied, angry, hurting, frightened, drowning in sorrow, but still human. Take a deep breath and try to remember the feeling, because you know that a minute from now, when you open your eyes again, it will be gone. Thank you.
All righty, it's on. Thank you so much, Etgar. That was really moving. Really moving. You said that you cried. You almost cried. I don't cry, but it was really down close. Before we dive into the kind of the big picture, the socio-political landscape of Israel and the dimensions that I was hoping to touch upon, I have a fetish for names. My students know that. I bring name tags at the beginning of the semester. It's very important for me to understand where the names are and how to pronounce that. So your name is quite unique. Etgar in Hebrew is a challenge. So my first question is, why? And the second is, what is the greatest challenge as a writer that you've confronted and overcame over the years?
Well, I think, first of all, I want to say about my name that, in all Hebrew names have a meaning, and I'm the youngest of three. So the eldest is called Nimrod. Nimrod means we shall rebel. This was the secret name of my father when he was in the underground fighting the British. And Nimrod had become a social activist. He started the legalized marijuana movement in Israel, and he's now with standing together an organization that basically fights the existing government and demonstrates in the street all the time. My sister in the middle, her name is Dana, which is the one who judges us. She's an ultra-Orthodox. She lives in Mea Shearim. She has 11 children and more than 50 grandchildren. And more than 50 grandchildren, it's not like when you say more than 40 languages, because usually when people say more than 40 languages, it means 41. I must say it's 48 in my case, but when I say she has more than 50 grandchildren, it means that after 50 she stopped counting. So it could be much more than 50. And so I can say from that my parents are very, very good with names. Now, my name, Etgar, comes from the fact my parents wanted to have many children. My mother was not very well, wasn't very healthy after the Holocaust, and after having my older brother and sister, she had a series of miscarriages. And when she was pregnant with me, she felt that it was her last chance to have a child. But the embryo cord got tied around my neck, and I had jaundice while I was in her womb. So the doctors explained to her that I'm going to die anyway, and they basically wanted to have an abortion. As my mom said, they preferred taking you out in pieces. They thought it would be safer for me. And my mother refused. And the doctor said to her, you know, Miss Keret, you're going to die. You have 2 children. They'll be orphans. And my mom looked at him and said, my husband is excellent with children. They'll have a beautiful childhood. I will not have an abortion. And I was born in 6 months of pregnancy, weighing less than 1 kilo, less than 2 pounds. And the doctor was quick when he gave the baby to my mother to say to her that she should understand that I'll probably die before I'll be a month old, so she should kind of distance herself emotionally from the baby. And the moment the doctor walked away, she took me and she said, I'm going to call you challenge. And your challenge will be to show this dumbass doctor that he knows nothing about this word. And when I grew up, whenever I would say to my mom, Mom, what would you want me to do? And my mom said, I wanted from you one thing, the day you were born. And you did exactly as I wished. So you owe me nothing. You can go and rob a bank as much as I care. And the funny thing is that, you know, that not only first names have meaning, but family names have meaning. And Keret, which is a Hebrew name of Krototsovsky, which is unpronounceable, actually means a metropole or a big city. So whenever I go to places, I say to people, my name is Urban Challenge, which is a great name for a pair of sneakers, but a pretty strange name for a human being.
It's a great outfitters or something. Your storytelling often reflects the absurdities of everyday life, the existence of human beings in the most minuscule way possible almost. How do you balance your humor and the darkness in your history, in your stories, my apologies, especially when dealing with very difficult subjects? For example, this book, highly recommended, suicide attempt, for example.
So I think that it's not that I use like humor and darkness, is that I write whatever comes to me, and many times it's dark. And then when it's dark, it's really like humor is like the airbag in your car. You know, you drive your story off the cliff, and then the airbag is there to save you, to make things bearable. Because whenever you use humor, you reflect on something. And whenever you reflect, you're exterior to it. So the ability to use humor is kind of, I would say, it's not changing reality, but it is the best way I know to protest against reality. You know, I think that when you think about it, when you're in school, you make jokes about your teachers. When I was in the army, they would make jokes about our commanders. You know, when you grow older, you make jokes about death. Death never makes jokes about you. He just comes and takes you like this. He doesn't need humor. Humor is the plan B. You know, it's really... There is this not very funny Jewish joke. I admit that it's not very funny, but I think that it just shows that they say that in a shtetl, you know, or like in Russia, it's a rainy day, the street is full of mud, the pavement is very narrow. A Jew goes home on the pavement, and then he sees this like big drunk Cossack in front of him. And the Cossack looks at the Jew, and he says, I never step off the pavement and stand in the mud for a dumb piece of shit. And the Jew steps into the mud and says, strange, I always do. and the thing about it is that, you know, that the Jew has his trousers covered with mud, but he kept his self-honor and self-respect by possessing humor. And, you know, my parents always told me, like, you know, you have to travel light, but, you know, tell a story, know how to tell a joke, know how to imagine something that does not exist, and you'll do okay.
Just a correction, I think it was a great joke, by the way. You kind of started in the early 1990s, as I said. You know, Road Pipelines was, again, my personal formative experience in literature. Einat, my literature teacher, would be happy to see me with you now, talking about books, but your writing has evolved over the years. And I want to know, especially given this is an Israel Studies program, to what extent was that a reflection or a function of changes in Israel itself? Israel is not the same as it was in 48, 67. We like counting, right? Like the Dag Nachash said, we're obsessed with numbers, we are obsessed with dates, with years. So how does that change in response to the changes that the state itself underwent?
What I must say is that, that I think that first, when I would look at myself evolving as a writer, I would say, okay, I wrote my first collection of short stories being in the IDF, so it shows some kind of word. I wrote my second collection being a bachelor in Tel Aviv, so it is another thing. I wrote my fourth book trying to pay for a mortgage, so it's another book. But the word around seemed seemed stable enough that I could really see how I change. I must say that the way that I see writing and creating in general had changed tremendously since the 7th of October. Because I think that if there was something before that it doesn't matter what I wrote about, there was some kind of vanity behind it. First of all, thinking that there is some kind of a great importance to what I do, and that, I do high art and I'm better than this or better than that. Then what happened in the 7th of October, that all the walls fell, and basically people were crying for help. I can tell you, dozens and dozens of stories. I tell you one story. It's a digression, but you get me back, okay?
That's on me, absolutely.
So the day that the Israeli infantry gets into Gaza, 6:30 a.m., I get a WhatsApp message from somebody I don't know. Okay, I won't even say. Let's call him Jacob. Okay, so I gotta say, hi, my name is Jacob. You don't know me. I'm an officer in the infantry. We're about to go into Gaza. I want to ask you for a favor. If I die, please, I'm sending you the number of my ex-girlfriend. Please call her and tell her that I went into battle thinking about her. So I write back. I say to him, I really hope that you will be safe and stuff, but I think it's better than you ask maybe your friend or your family that will contact her. She doesn't know me. And he writes back, you don't understand. It ended really badly. She will not speak to anyone who knows me, but you're a favorite author. So if you call her or text her, she's bound to listen to you. So I say to him, I text to him, how about we try to think together of another way around it? And in the WhatsApp you see that this was not read, and the soldiers are already entering Gaza. And I have a lot of anxiety and a lot of imagination. And I imagine that, as you really, at that point, there are hundreds and hundreds of dead. And I know that there will be more hundreds and hundreds of dead. And I say, this guy could die and I won't even see his name. I can't take that. So I text the girl. I said to her, listen, I'm Etgar Keret. I'm not supposed to do it, but your ex-boyfriend, he's now in Gaza, and he said that he's going there thinking about you and feeling sorry for everything bad that had happened before you. So I thought maybe it would be useful to tell you that because, he said only if he dies, but, maybe it's a good thing to know even if he's alive. And she texts me back, are you really Etgar Keret? And I said, yes. And basically we sent a few other texts, and she said, yeah, I really love your books and stuff. And I said, oh, thank you. And then she said, did he ever tell you why we broke up? And I said, no. And she said, do you want to know? And I said, yes. And then she tells me why they broke up, okay? So I I tell her, okay, I'm on your camp, okay? Okay, you love my books. You're on the right side here, okay? So how about, she was religious. So how about every Friday I send you a story for Shabbat? It's like, I can't do much, but I can tell you. And she said, sure. And basically I would send her every week a story for Shabbat. And as I would go around the communities, whenever I would see somebody that seemed to like my story, I say, hey, I have a WhatsApp group. You want a story for Shabbat? And this WhatsApp group went for, I would say, basically 7 months or 8 months. And at some stage, which it's horrible to say, I get an Instagram message from somebody said, I heard there is a secret WhatsApp group of story for Shabbat, and I want to join it. I don't want to cheat or anything. I'm not in the army. Nobody close to me was kidnapped and died, but my daughter has cancer, and I really need something to wait for every week. And if you send me a story, maybe it will make it easier. And then, and I wrote, you could just like stories. It's enough, There's no need. You don't need to show your scars to get into the group. But this idea of kind of these stories kind of becoming this really simple commodity that you give to people, it's really like I got a message on Instagram from this woman saying, my husband, you can't speak from Gaza on the phone because the Hamas can pinpoint on the signal. So sometimes they go out, they go like a few kilometers, they let them speak, and then they go back, and then you won't hear from them for weeks. So she said, I was talking to my husband when he came out, and I said to him, tell me what food you want me to prepare you when you come back. And basically, I would say this was very naive because it took many people 4 months or 5 months to have their first leave. And he said, forget it, it's not important. I said, no, I want you to tell me something. And then my husband said to me, you want to do something for me? Write to me a story about a crocodile. And then he got disconnected. And she said, I have a 3-month-old baby. I don't know how to write. You write to him a story about a crocodile. And I said, okay. And I wrote to him a story about a crocodile. And I'm saying, if you asked me a year ago that that people would send me an Instagram message and say, write this story, and I would write a story for them, I would say, this doesn't work this way. But in this time, I'll tell you another 2 anecdotes like this. It's really so first of all, there was a young soldier that he lost a leg in Sejaia in Gaza. He was an infantry soldier, and he really liked stories and writing, and I visited him, and he would send me stories over WhatsApp, and I would tell him stuff about his stories, and then one day he said, hey, I have an idea, let's write a story together. And I said to him, look, you're young, it doesn't work this way, I don't know if you spoke to Eli, but I'm an internationally renowned writer, being translated to more than
keynote speaker at the Dubin Lecture 2024.
Yeah, like I didn't say it this way, but I was as pompous without saying it, like saying, I'm a professor in literature in Ben Gurion University. People don't write stories together. You can write your own story. I write my stories. You don't do that. And he wrote to me, why? It's easy. I'll send you a paragraph, and you write the next one. Here's the first paragraph. And I wrote the next one, and he wrote the third one, and we wrote the fourth one. And I wrote a story with this soldier. And I want to say it's probably not one of my best stories, but it was one of the stories that I felt most moved and useful writing it. And what I want to say is that, that this kind of falling of voice, it went way more, it wasn't like just tragic stories. It's like just before I was supposed to send my latest book, the one that is not out yet in the US, to the publisher, I get this WhatsApp message from a guy. And he writes to me, it's all of them are people I don't know. So he says, listen, since the war started, my ex-wife, she's really she had it really, really hard. And tomorrow it's her birthday and your favorite author. So I had this great idea that you and me, we will hide in the bushes right outside our apartment building. And when she comes out to work, we'll jump out of the bushes and surprise her. And I wrote him, listen, we don't know each other well. First, I want to ask, do you happen to have a restraining order? And he said, no, man, you don't get it. Like, we're divorced, but we love each other. It's really, really wonderful. And I said, yeah, but I'm saying, I'm 57 years old, I think last time I jumped out of the bushes to surprise an ex-wife was when in my 40s, I'm too old for this. And the guy said to me, okay, I understand. I just want to try. And then I go over the book. And when you have a collection of short stories that you write over the years, sometimes you notice that you use the same name a few times. And when you look at the collection, you say, oh, it shouldn't be the same name. And then I see that in one of my stories, I have an ex-wife, a divorced woman, going on a date, and her name is exactly the name of a main character in another story. And I text him, I say, what's your ex-wife's name? And he said, Oksana. So I said, listen, I'm just handing my book. When you jump out of the bushes on Sunday, I'm sending you on WhatsApp a story where your ex-wife is a character, and tell her when the book will be out, she's a character in my book. And he said, man, you're great. I said it to him, and Oksana was happy. And the idea is that before the war started, I really, really felt that I was on some kind of a pedestal, that I really had looking up. I would put my stories, hang them on the wall, and people would be there, come to watch. But the moment that the war broke, I said, this is just another thing that I can do, to pass the time, to make people happy, to make someone not think about something horrible that had happened to him. So it kind of like it made stories something more accessible and less pompous.
Certainly the WhatsApp. I'm going to invite people to walk up to the microphone and ask questions. As I always say in events, public events, conferences, a question is a sentence with a question mark at the end. A comment is a sentence, not a paragraph, or a whole chapter in a new manuscript. Einav Tzach is first to my left. Einav, go ahead. He's a former student and a brilliant writer as well.
Hi, Etgar. So in April, you spoke on a podcast that I really like. It's called Unholy. And you had an interview with Ira Glass, who's your very close Jewish-American friend. You spoke about the strains of your relationship since October 7th. And now it's been 5 months. We're approaching the 1-year mark of the war. I'm curious, how have those conversations changed? Have they gotten harder as the war kind of continues and the geopolitical situation isn't improving?
So I think, that I started with my family, so I'll start the answer also with my family. In my family, as I said, my father was in the Etzel, in the underground, how do you say, the Irgun, and he was a great Jabotinsky follower, and he voted Likud all his life until Benjamin Netanyahu was there for the first time, and then he said, I'm sorry, I either didn't read Jabotinsky or didn't get it, but he was a right-winger. My mother was one of the people who started a movement, a political party called the Tchia, which was to the right of the Likud. So basically, both my parents were very, very empathic people, very sensitive, and they had right-wing views. My brother is an anti-Zionist lefty. I'm a Zionist lefty, okay? My sister is an ultra-Orthodox who never votes in the election and who says that she lives in the land of Israel, but she doesn't really identify with the government. We never in our life had a fight over politics. My father said, look, the way I see it, that politics is basically like you have this big furniture in your room and you want to take it out. And people can argue, one can say, let's take it out of the window. let's put it to the side, take it out to pieces. But he said, as long as we're all good people, seeking good things, then we have nothing to fight about. We can talk about a lot. We can say, maybe we take the table this way, or what are you doing, or it's not going to work. But there's nothing to fight about. Now, I can say that Ira and me, we've been friends for almost 20 years. And I can say that the time of the war was really the first time in which we saw many things differently. And I think that we saw them differently because we were exposed to different medias, because we live in different societies. But at the bottom line, what we never stopped seeing is our friendship and the fact that we're both good guys trying to get this piece of furniture out of the room. I think that one thing that I have to say for Ira, I wish you could say the same about me, I'm not sure, is humility. Because Ira is not saying, I know what's right. He can say, I don't agree with what you're saying. I don't subscribe to what you're saying. And I must say that, that if anything, I think that this year of war had made us better friends, just for the fact that we can see that even if we don't see things the same way, every time I talk to Ira, it ends with WhatsApp links. You must read this in The Guardian. You probably don't know this in Haaretz. You should see this. And basically, we're feeding each other with information. And in the end, at the bottom line, one could think X, one could think Y. I don't think our opinions are that far apart, but I think that in the bottom line, those conversations, very much like Jews learn the Gemara in Chevruta, are basically a way in which the disagreement makes us both grow.
Hi. You mentioned that in your family, people spoke 6, 7 languages. So, number one, how many languages do you speak? And number two, how much control and how do you have control on the various translations that you have of your books that are now all over the world?
So I speak 1.5 language. I speak some English and Hebrew, but the thing about my parents that it wasn't that they were into studying languages. It's like, when my mother was very, very young, in the ghetto, my father had taught her, she knew Polish and she knew Yiddish, and he taught her German. And he said, this won't necessarily keep you alive, but when you speak someone's language, it's much more difficult for him to dehumanize you. So if you know German, it may save your life. And I think, being children of war, drifting through countries, they collected those languages. They never saw in it a goal. And I really feel many times that, that I never had the necessity to learn as many languages as they have learned. And what you say about translations, and then I was saying to Eli when we were sitting in the back room, because Eli read me both in Hebrew and English, and he says sometimes, he reads it in English and says, what is this in Hebrew, That Chaim Nachman Bialik, Israel's national poet, he once said that reading a book in translation is like kissing somebody through a veil. And this is true, because languages, they don't function the same way. So many times when things that are very, very intuitive, can I give an example of such a short one? Yeah, so a short example. So I give you an example. For example, English and Hebrew and translation. In English, you have a masculine, feminine, and it form. In Hebrew, you only have masculine and feminine, which means a chair, a table, a glass, they're either he or she. Now, I wrote a story about a real estate guy, that there was a woman who leaves her husband because he had an affair, and he's showing her apartments. And as he shows her apartment, he gradually understands that she came to him because he had rented the love nest of her husband, and that she wants to gather information about his lover. And he wants to be professional and do business. So at some stage, she says to him, "Tell me the truth. Is she beautiful?" And she says, "Not only she's beautiful, but you'll have your own parking." Because in Hebrew, an apartment is feminine. And this is his way of pretending that he doesn't understand the question. So when you have to translate something like that, you have to reinvent it. I can sit with the translators and say, how can we create this kind of effect in English? But the story doesn't stay the same.
Thank you so much. I think there's another question.
Hi, thank you very much for your address. It was really wonderful. As a reader, I have a bit of a more technical question than has been asked so far, and it's about your process as a writer. And so my question would be, so I think that personally, like, the short form is far more impressive than like taking forever to get to the point, or like far more impressive than a Ulysses, for example. And so I wanted to ask you, how did you come to the short form? And how easy is it for you to go from short to long? And is there one that is more comfortable to you? And yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So again, many people come to me and say, it's much more difficult to write short stories than to write a long story. And I say, to you maybe, because for me, I think that, it's just a question of process. I think that many times, when you write a novel, many novelists, it's really kind of a process of building a structure. It's like, you have a blueprint, you say this is the first chapter, then they're going to discover this thing. For me, short stories are more like kind of like trust falls. I close my eyes, I fall back, and I hope that the story will catch me. What I have is just the tale of a story, a sentence, an image, but I make it a point that I don't know what's going to happen in this story. I was once asked why I don't write novels, and I said that for me, writing is like exploding, and I've yet to learn how to explode slowly.
I don't know what that means, but I think we are out of time.
No, I think it means that somebody wants to ask questions.
Somebody is too shy to ask a... Okay. Do you want to shout the question?
I can give you
I think it's Moti. You know him.
Yeah, Moti, come on.
It can be very short, it can be very long, so if it's too long, you can skip it and you can catch up some other time. What is your opinion of AI and the way it may influence writers and their work?
Okay. So what's my opinion of AI and how it will influence the world? So actually, a lot of the stories in my latest collection in Hebrew, they have to deal with AI and technology in general. And basically, and again, I did researches, I worked with many people who know a lot about that, I did something. I would say that there is a good chance that it will end humanity. But I'm saying, but in a good way, it's not going to be like those movies when robots get into it and say, Eli, you're human, you're dead. No.
Terminator, 1984.
But I can give just two tiny examples of really the kind of effect that it can have. And, like I could rant about social media because actually this is the easiest and the most true thing. But what I really think is that, let's say, that the technology creates all those kind of pipes and roads that we can go through. And the idea is that when we rely so much on technology, then basically we know how to take those roads, but we lose the ability to go off roads. So if, for example, AI doesn't understand obscurity or ambiguity, it will indoctrinate us not to use obscurity and ambiguity. Try to write an obscure post that will go viral. It will not go viral, not because of the people, because of the technology, because the algorithm won't understand it. So very quickly you learn that it's not good to write anything that is obscure, that you have to be for or against. And another example is just something that it has to be with my son. So bear with me because I love talking about my son. Okay, so the thing is that I write, I would say, a couple of hundreds of WhatsApp messages every day because people want me to write stories about crocodiles. I'm working. So, and my son pities me because he sees me with my big thumb kind of trying to write those messages very slowly. And he said to me, "Father, let me show you something. If you press long the WhatsApp message, you can just do an emoji and answer." And he said, "You can access tons of emojis, but here I put 4. Here, you don't even have to press the plus, okay? I'll do this one, the thank you one. I'll give you a heart one." And basically, it took me time to figure it out, but there are 2 heart ones. There is a heart, and there are fingers doing a heart. If I got it right, if you put the heart, it means I love you. If you put the fingers doing the heart, you're saying, I'm saying I love you. Okay, but we settled for the one with the real heart. And I don't even remember. I have the thumb up. I don't even remember the 4 ones. Now, this is amazing because if you will send me a message, say, can you come to my house at 5? I go like this, and I say, I made a dinner for you. I go like this. And you say, but please, not like last time when you got drunk and you hit on my wife. So I'll send you a heart. Why? Because I won't go like this, and I won't go like this, and this is my only third option. And this is how a world-renowned author basically communicates with the word with 3 options. Now, the AI or the technology didn't do anything to me, but if I would give each of you a golf crate and say, why walk? Use the golf crate, within 3 weeks, none of you would be able to walk. And I'm saying that basically this kind of a word in which we outsource so much, and in which we get used to outsource so much. Look, we're living in an age, and I'm an old guy. I don't think I ever saw anything close to that, okay? We're living in an age where, for example, we even outsource our compassion. Think about it. People tell you, you can't forgive this guy. He did a horrible thing. If you will forgive this guy, I will not forgive you. Now, what kind of a word is it in which even the decision when to forgive somebody is not our own? Why do we accept that? Because we live in a world where basically everything we're holding, technology come and say, hey, it's heavy, give it to me. And every dilemma we have, hey, I decided for you. And you go into Instagram, I'll start the video for you. This is what you want to see. And basically, this kind of de-evolution kind of make us shrink and become, in a sense, less complex and less deep entities.
I need a new spiel for an answer should be a sentence with a period or something, but that's for the next time. All righty, please join me in thanking Etgar Keret for a wonderful talk, for a wonderful conversation.
Thank you. Toda.